Hi guys, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what went into the writing of my book, The Passion Sacred Dance and the Celtic Stewards Chronicles. I began studying Celtic mythology kind of in a roundabout way. When I was a child, I was really into the Arthurian legends. I don't remember how that got started. I assume that it was Sword in the Stone. I saw that and it probably sparked something. If it wasn't that, then my mother read me some of their stories. I don't remember. But anyway, that has always had an influence on me from that time until the writing of this book. Fast forward to when I was in college, I took a class on Joseph Campbell's Transformation of Myth Through Time. If you know anything about that book or that series, he talks a lot about Arthurian legend. At the same time, I was delving into books on Wicca, and I had read Scott Cunningham and Starhawk and Janet and Stuart Farrar's The Witch's Goddess, which is where I discovered the Irish goddess Breed. Now, if you don't know her, she is the Irish goddess of poetry, smithcraft, writing, arts, and fire. But the most important thing to me was that she was a goddess of poetry and writing. From her, I went on to discover the Irish god Lugh, who is known as the master of all arts. Well, I was a budding writer at the time, so these were perfect gods for me to catch my interest. I began noodling around with Wiccan ritual, and I would call on them whenever I needed inspiration, or when I was stuck in the middle of a project, or when I wanted to finish a project, that kind of thing. Fast forward a couple more years, and I discovered Celtic Reconstructionism. And if you don't know Celtic Reconstructionism, they are a group of people who take the Celtic myths and the Celtic histories, and try to reconstruct what it was that the Celts actually did. In readings of things like not only the myths, but books by Peter Beresford Ellis and other such scholars, there's little tidbits and threads of actual what we think might be truth about those people. Anyway, the stories of the Druids and their gods and their bards especially inspired me a lot, and I picture that what I do as a writer in the spending 9 hours a day in my head writing down and typing and recording all these stories that I have, like the Passion Sacred Dance and its follow-up, which I hope will be coming out this year sometime, in the Celtic Stewards Chronicles, kind of creates a continuity. So in that way, in writing these and putting these stories down in a new form is like honoring these gods to me. In the Celtic Stewards Chronicles, in the first book, Passion Sacred Dance, the main character is part of a family who has always been told that the Irish gods fought a battle on their land, and that every 500 years they're going to come back and they're going to ask for your land, and you have to give it to the right one. If you give it to the wrong one, we're in trouble. So this girl has grown up through our society now and living in Florida in our time, and she's not quite sure. She still kind of believes that this is real. I mean, 500 years is a long time. Anyway, so she's living in Florida, and if you know anything about Florida, the winters we have here are really mild, but around the end of February, the end of January, early February, it gets really cold here. Now, I know some of you are laughing because really cold to you is not really cold to what's really cold to you is probably freezing to me. We have rare times where the weather drops to like the 20s. Well, in her book, they're dropping to the 20s and lower fast. And so she's going, this isn't right. And she's expecting this guy to walk in and say, okay, this is what's going on. We're going to have to fight this battle with Balor, the god of destruction, and we need your land to do it. So February 2nd tied in well for the winter theme, but it's also, if you know anything about Irish mythology, and if you don't, I'm going to tell you, February 2nd is a date that's sacred to the goddess Breed. You remember her? I mentioned her a minute ago. She was one of the ones that I was first intrigued with when I started looking through books on Wicca all those years ago. So it seemed logical when I was writing this book to center this battle, this ceremonial battle, around her specific day. And on top of her, I had added, since he was part of the war as well, I added Lou. So they worked into the story, and there's actually parts where they show up. And it seemed to me, as the writer, as the budding bard, as the person who studied this all her life, as a way to kind of honor those two gods that I had been intrigued with all this time. That's sort of what I see my writing as. It's a calling, but it's also a way to honor these gods. So where other pagans that I know might do rituals like casting the circle and calling the quarters and all that, for me, it's something that I live. I mean, I write all the time. If I'm not writing, I'm thinking about writing, or I'm talking about writing. So it's more of a lifestyle than anything. And it's an honoring of what the bards have done throughout time, and feels like being part of the continuity. So in this story, that ties in as well, because Stacy, my heroine, is part of a continuity in her family of the guardians of this sacred ground to these Celtic gods that she's honored her entire family's lives. Anyway, between that and just my love of fantasy, I tied them all together in this mythic universe that pays homage to these myths that I've always been in love with. This is not the first time I have done this, and it's probably not the last time I ever will. In fact, the second book in the Celtic Stewards Chronicles is going to cover Stacy's grandmother's dealings with the sacred ground in Ireland, and with the Tuatha De Danann gods that come to her and say, okay, we need your land to fight this battle, and you can't really say no, or I'm not going to tell you what happens if she says no. You have to read to find out. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this look into the mind of an author and the Celtic Steward Chronicles, in which I'm reviving their myths a little bit. And have a good night.